Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Kerry Clack, columnist, editorial board member.
Nancy M. Prayer-Johnson, associate editor at the editorial board.
Brian Chasnoff, investigative reporter.
And we're pretty much at a point where we have our new podcast studio set up, and this is going to be the first podcast that we've done that will be on YouTube, so you can look for it there if you're interested in seeing what we look like. If you don't want to, I understand that too. And we've been spending our time just to kind of preparing these last few minutes discussing whether the proper pronunciation for a word is niche or niche.
Is niche.
Niche or niche?
Or maybe we could coin a new one. Niche.
So we, please submit your thoughts on this, because we haven't really been able to decide on what this. Some interesting things happening in the past week. President Joe Biden announced a student loan forgiveness plan, which I think we'll probably talk about on this episode. And it's there's been a lot of debate about it, some controversy over it. But we also had something interesting in San Antonio, where Democratic gubernatorial candidate Beto O'Rourke, he was in town on Friday. He was doing a book signing at Nowhere Books, and he had a public speaking event scheduled that night, and he took sick. He had a bacterial infection, and he cut the book event short. And when they took him to Methodist Hospital, he's apparently recuperating in El Paso and taking a break from the campaign circuit, and he'll hopefully be out there again soon. I think all of you know that Congressional District 23 has been one of the few true swing districts in the state of Texas. It's a sprawling district. It covers about 800 miles of border territory. It stretches from San Antonio to the edge of El Paso. And we've had some really close, interesting races over the years. And this year's contest is between the Republican incumbent Tony Gonzales, who's seeking a second term, and his Democratic nominee, John Lira, who served 11 years in the Marines. He was a legislative fellow on Capitol Hill. He's a native San Antonian running for Congress for the first time, as Tony Gonzales did 2 years ago. And we're really happy to have John Lira on the podcast today talking about his campaign. John, thanks so much for being with us.
Absolutely. This is, I'm a huge fan of the podcast, of the commentary that comes out of it. So this is a bucket list appearance for me. And I'm glad that this is the first one that people can see live, not live, but, on YouTube. It's an honor.
Well, we talked about how what a big district this is, and you've been campaigning for more than a year now, I think. And I was just curious, when you talk to people in the district, what are the big issues that people are talking about? What are the major concerns that you're hearing from them?
Yeah, it's a big district. I would say all around, kind of pan district from San Antonio to El Paso, all the way down south to as far as Ensenada and Cotulla. I think one of the main issues for everybody across the country is the inflation, is the rising gas prices, and what the president is doing about it in a lot of ways. Recently, the Democrats have signed some pretty big pieces of legislation. So now we can hit the trail and talk a little bit more about what Democrats are doing about it. But some of the more regional things, of course, this district has Uvalde in it. So gun safety is front and center. It has 820 miles of Texas-Mexico border. So our immigration, our asylum, our border security reforms are front and center. This district, I say we have enough here to fuel the country, fly the country, and to feed the country. So, this is they're concerned about, the future of energy here. I know that the Inflation Reduction Act has added huge investments potentially to wind and solar, which is prominent in Texas 23, along with oil. So I'll add is that they want some of that bipartisan infrastructure money that has been approved and is just kind of waiting to get work its way down. They want some of that here in the district as well. And then, of course, kind of the final thing that I'll say that I have been hearing more about is actually the Dobbs decision, I would say, as we're knocking doors.
The abortion decision, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even our polling kind of confirms what we've been hearing at the doors. There's some bipartisan disapproval for this in the district, which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned inflation, and one of the arguments from Republicans, and I think your opponent has said this, is that the American Rescue Plan Act, which was passed early in 2021, early in the Biden administration, and was a really big, ambitious package. There's been the argument on the Republican side that had an inflationary effect. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, I think there was a lot of variables, first of all, for the inflation. I mean, our economy was completely shut down. Certain industries surged with online consumerism. Certain industries dropped because, like our restaurants and like our service industries out here in San Antonio and West Texas. So I think there's a lot of variables at play. I think it made monumental investments when we needed them. We needed to kickstart our economy. These little counties out here that are in our district were struggling to keep up with the effects of COVID. What that influx of resources did was provide these counties enough to get their medical programs a bit more in order, increase public safety, do some long-term investments. That's one of the first questions that I ask when I go to these counties and visit with judges or mayors. How are you spending your American Rescue Plan money? And they kind of light up when they talk about it, because these are projects that have, one, like I said, helped increase public safety and some of their medical capabilities, but also projects that they might not have been able to get started sooner, that they can now put some money, some resources towards. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of things that cause inflation. I mean, Greg Abbott's shutdown of the border in July helped cause inflation. The first round of stimulus checks, you could argue, would cause inflation. It's just that we're having still, the global supply chain has been disrupted. Our economy was disrupted. Our institutions like medical, educational, our everything was kind of disrupted. So we're still kind of feeling those ripple effects of those peaks and valleys of our inflation. But I think, with the July report of a flat inflation rise, that the seas are starting to stabilize and starting to settle.
Your opponent, Tony Gonzales, I think he could be characterized as a moderate. Correct me if you don't think so. But do you see any signs of him drifting rightward under pressure from the GOP?
Absolutely, I do. Moderate, I guess. If you look at his voting record, he's kind of taken some pretty basic Republican stances. He has come out of he has a couple of outliers in front of votes. He did vote to certify the election. He did vote, more recently for the Defense of Marriage Act. And again, for the Safer Communities Act, I would argue because he saw the poll numbers, plunging, and he's heard the demand from his constituents to finally kind of the pressure built up to do that. But absolutely, there has been a third addition to this race. It's actually becoming a three-person race with the addition of Frank Lopez Jr. Now, this is a former Republican county chair. This is a former Republican committeeman, a career Border Patrol agent, has jumped into this race and is openly challenging Gonzales for the far right vote, for the MAGA vote in a lot of ways. So it's up to Gonzales. We have been working our Democratic coalition and our moderates since day one, since May 21, since we've been in this race. And with Frank Lopez now chomping away at the more right MAGA votes, far right Trumpy type of votes, Gonzales's base is shrinking right now. So he has to make a very important decision, because right now he has a very slim sliver of moderate Republicans. I mean, those are probably the rarest kind of creatures in Texas politics, are those moderate Republicans. And if he's banking on a Texas 23 win just off of that slim kind of portion of votes, it's going to be a tough time for him. So he's going to have to figure out if he's going to fight for those far right votes again.
Well, I wanted to ask you about Frank Lopez, because I know your campaign has described it as a three-person race. I think the Tony Gonzales camp thinks that he's not going to be a big factor. But I guess I would ask how big a percentage of the vote do you think he can get, and how much do you need him to do, or how many votes do you need him to siphon away from Tony Gonzales to really put you in a position where you think you can win the race?
Yeah, he's already a big factor. I mean, just him jumping in the race, we did some polling. He's already polling at 6%, which is higher than any other independent or third-party candidate in the Texas 23 race. So he's already maxing out with just a month being in this race. He is very connected with the Del Rio. I'm knocking on doors. People are aware that Frank Lopez is in the race. So he has name recognition as the county chair. So I think for me to be competitive, like I said, to kind of really have an impact and sway, I think anywhere between if he takes 10% out of this race, and we hold together our about 46-47% Democratic voter coalition, I think we've got this. I think he eats too much into Tony Gonzales's lead at that point.
You seem to have a great deal of enthusiasm. I mean, if we didn't know who you were and what you were running for, it almost would sound like that you were maybe a member of Frank Lopez's campaign. I mean, you are kind of excited about what the potential, what it could do for your race.
It's the multiple variables of this exciting race. This is Texas 23 here. This is a district that is historically known for flipping. It's historically known for going against polls. This is just one of the many variables of this race. I say we have three pathways to victory. One is the Beto bump, right? Beto was in 2018. Democrats had their best year ever. Maybe a 2% bump came out of just having a strong top of ticket. We have a great top of ticket, Democratic ticket at statewide here in Texas this year. But also Uvalde is really in play here. These are traditionally potentially low propensity voters that have not been engaged and haven't really paid attention to politics. But now they are paying attention. They know who their elected leaders are and they want accountability. They feel failed by their elected leaders at multiple levels. So they're in play this time around. This wasn't part of our math. Started coming into this race. And then again, Frank Lopez. So with the overperformance of Beto by 2%, Uvalde overperforming for Democrats by 2%, and Frank Lopez taking between, let's just say 7 and 10%, that could be a 10-point swing in this race.
I've seen you in Uvalde at some of the press conferences. So I've seen you a few times there. What are you hearing directly from Uvalde residents? What are they telling you? What do they want?
They still feel that Republicans care more about protecting access to weapons and protecting children. Bottom line, what they really want, and they've had two really stark demands, and I'll say three actually. One is they want Governor Greg Abbott to call a special session. And the topic of that special session, they want to be increasing the age to purchase a weapon from 18 to 21. Especially for those assault-style, high-capacity, high-velocity weapons. And I would say third, and we just had the march this weekend, is I think they are calling for an all-out assault weapons ban. That might have to come at the federal level. I'm sure it's not going to come at the state level, but they were at the Capitol this week calling for that as well. So I think those are the more prominent kind of policy messages that I'm hearing from them. But again, they feel failed at multiple levels. They want accountability. They have a high anti-incumbent fervor right now, and they're paying attention.
Do you think Tony has done enough? And what do you think of his, some of the counties censoring him?
I don't think he's done enough, especially in Uvalde. I think he did not rise to the occasion to be the leader that they needed at that moment. I mean, he famously said, the day after, not today on national TV for not wanting to talk about this issue when asked by Gayle King. The Democrats put up a bill called the Protecting Our Children Act 2 weeks after the Uvalde shooting. They acted. Tony Gonzales voted against that. It took him a month to ultimately get to a very watered down bill that had some more mental health stuff, less kind of weapons or, firearm stuff, but he did vote for it. But we had to watch him kind of stumble and stammer through national TV interviews, failing to answer why does an 18-year-old need an automatic, assault style weapon? So again, this was all noticed, So I think that in the district at large, the number one job of any congressional representative is to vote to get resources into the district.
Well, what is your position on assault weapons ban?
My position on assault weapons ban is that if it is in Congress, I will consider it and I will likely vote for it. Short of an all-out assault weapons ban, this is what I would push for. The banning of the sale of weapons to anybody that does not have advanced or enhanced background screenings to include a mental health check, to anyone that does not have advanced training on this weapon, like me and my buddies had in the Marine Corps, up to that level, certain hours or a certain number of credits or something to that we know that they know how to use it properly, and then a special licensing. So again, it's like taking it back to our concealed carry days where we have to know that you're criminally are able to do it. You don't have a criminal record, that you're mentally capable of doing it, and that you're licensed to do it. I think that those standards right there basically put you at the level of a peace officer. But listen, this doesn't mean that I don't argue with the question, why do we need these weapons in society at all? And my biggest kind of where I come down is why we do not need them in society is because they instantly overwhelm the law enforcements that are in society trying to protect us. One person with a fully automatic assault style, high velocity, high capacity weapon can keep 3 or 4 officers at bay for hours. And we don't want those in society. Nobody should able to have access to a higher weapon than what our police officers should have in society who are charged for protecting us.
Well, the communities in District 23 have certainly been affected by the fact that we've seen an increase in the number of migrants coming to the border over the past year and a half since the Biden administration came in. I think this was a trend that we saw starting really a few months before he took office, but it's accelerated since then. I was curious how, when you look at that trend, how much of that responsibility do you put on the Biden administration? Do you think there are policies that they've put in place that have created that, or are we just dealing with factors that are happening in some of these countries that don't necessarily have much to do with what the U.S. policies, but these are trends that are sort of somewhat outside of our control at this point?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect kind of storm of kind of this long-term neglect of the courage to kind of do something at the border. I would put it on Congress. Right off the bat, Congress after Congress after Congress has failed to step up, find the courage, and find the kind of backbone to come together and to figure out, untangle what's going on our southern border. There's going to be, it's going to continue. Every president from, all the way dating back to Obama to Trump to President Biden to whoever the next person is going to be, the next person is going to be facing with criticism at the border unless Congress steps up. These last presidents have taken very narrow focuses on Band-Aid solutions on how to fix the border. So almost niche projects in a lot of ways.
I see where you fall.
I don't know if we were starting a drinking game here, but
I knew I was going to find a way to work it in.
Yeah, well played.
But yeah, no, I mean, listen, you can definitely blame Biden. There were still caravans coming as soon as, March 2019 during the Trump administration. He's been in office for a year and a half. If you want to blame him for some of his policies, absolutely. I think he needs to do more. But at the same time, look at the Texas governors who have been in office, who have pumped billions and billions of Texas taxpayer dollars to fixing the border. And we still have migrant caravans. All they've done is flood our jail systems, our county court systems, with kind of racked up charges against migrants. So I would say, let's look at our Texas governors and how much we have spent as Texans, before we want to, blame a president who's only been in office for a year and a half.
I'm curious about 23 Marines. Tony is Navy, and we had Will Hurd, we had other candidates, Gina Ortiz-Jones and Jay Hewlings, intelligence, CIA. What is it about CD23 that attracts so many on both sides, young professionals, young politicians from the military and intelligence?
I would just say we don't do things because they're easy. We do things because they are hard. I think this is a very hard district to win, to campaign in, to hold. I mean, you have to have tough skin to jump into a 29 county. If this was a state, it would be the 25th biggest state in our country right now. So to jump into that, you've got to kind of be young. You've got to be logistics. You got to be ready to pack a bag and stay on the road and camp out wherever you stay at that night in a lot of ways. So I think in a lot of ways, I don't know why it's developed this profile in the district, but it has. I think, it has some military in it with Laughlin. Now we have a little bit of Fort Bliss. Now we have all of Lackland. But, we have Camp Bullis as well. So I think that, it goes back to, this is Spanish El Norte. This was some of the first kind of colonized pieces of North America once Spain landed, but in Texas, in kind of the United States proper. And think about what they brought with them. They brought the missionaries, they brought the military, and they brought the governor. So military has always been a part of San Antonio life, of Spanish El Norte, West Texas life since the Spanish have arrived. So we've always known to kind of commend and kind of honor our military. And you can look back even to Native American culture that was prominent out in our region in West Texas, where, they just kind of really admired the warriors, and kind of the ones who do take up arms and kind of defend the tribe and go out and fight. So I think that like I said, it's this kind of culture in a lot of ways, right? We are part of Military City, USA, San Antonio. A little bit has to do with just the ruggedness of the district itself, where you've got to have some sort of, it's a military style mindset. I mean, we do operations out into the district. I name the operations as we go out, because this is regions. The San Antonio region is not the same as the Permian Basin region, which is not the same as the far west El Paso region, which is not the Winter Garden region. So we kind of have to approach it. I approach it as a military intelligence analyst, as I was in the Marines.
John, a week before last, your opponent Tony Gonzales announced that he was holding a telephone town hall with Marjorie Taylor Greene. the Republican Congresswoman. This is someone who has chased and harassed a teenage survivor of the Parkland school shooting. She's someone who has questioned whether the 9/11 attack on the Pentagon was real. She spoke at an event hosted by a white nationalist. She said, "We're a Christian. We should be a Christian nationalist nation." She is one of the many Republicans who has said that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. What do you make of Tony Gonzales' decision to align himself with someone like that?
Well, it's a poor taste for all the reasons you mentioned, kind of, her associating and assaulting, gun violence victims and school shooting victims with Uvalde in our backyard. But I think it's in a lot of ways the Frank Lopez factor. He needs to establish his far right MAGA kind of bona fides again with the people in the district. So he's thinking that who's the most kind of high visibility, high profile MAGA surrogate that I think I can bring to the district. And it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, I was on that phone call. I was the one, I got the random call and they said, "Hey, stay on if you want to join this."
Well, I have to say, I didn't hear it. I mean, what stood out to you about the call?
I mean, the Marjorie Taylor Greene's portion was essentially she was blaming Texas for Georgia's migrants and the buses that are pulling up to Georgia. She was saying that Tony Gonzales is running a tourist operation to the border, as many members of Congress that he's taking out there. She kind of chuckled to be like, "Well, it's kind of like you're running a tourist operation out there," which I feel he is. He's exploiting our border. She promoted a bill that punishes, I think, parents of transgender kids on the call, and was proud that Tony Gonzales was one of those sponsors, So, I mean, this is not Texas 23. Texas 23 is a very moderate district, as you know. We have an even count of red districts and even count of blue districts. And that type of rhetoric, is not going to go very far when you need crossover votes to win.
There's a new NBC News poll out that shows that so-called persuadable voters, which I think they say is maybe about a quarter of the electorate, that there's been a shift to Democrats in recent months. Over the first 3 months of the year, Republicans were like 6 points ahead among persuadables, and Democrats are now in that NBC News poll are 3 points ahead. And a lot of that has been attributed to a backlash to the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, which took away the federal protections for abortion access. I'm curious about District 23 because you did mention the Dobbs decision has been a factor when you talk to people. It's a majority Latino district. We tend to think, and it's kind of maybe a trope in the media that Latino voters are even if they vote Democratic, they're socially conservative, particularly on an issue like abortion. What are you hearing specifically from people? Is it just that they feel like the Supreme Court it went too far? I'm imagining that there's probably kind of a nuanced sort of view on abortion that you're hearing from people. Is that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's almost surprising because it's shown again at the doors when we're talking and out in the field and in the district, but it's also showing in our polling as well. I think, listen, this is Texas, right? It prides ourselves on being the land of freedom, liberty. Even most conservative women will feel that they've had a liberty and a freedom that's been stripped from them. They might, I think women are starting to really think through this who might have been against, women's access to abortion. And they're starting to think, well, what if it's my daughter and that we have to go out of state now? How are we going to do that research? How are we going to tell our employers why we're going out of state? I think the repercussions, it's like the dog that caught the car. Right now, they've caught the car. And, even before this, they were mad. They were already upset because Texas was leading, had one of the most aggressive anti-abortion bills even before the Dobbs decision. So, of course, the trigger law kicked in, I think, last week as well. So it's just another area where Texas Republicans just overreached. They overreached with the voting bill, and it's cast out even Republican votes. They overreached with the constitutional carry that not even police associations supported. They overreached with abortion. Now they're overreaching in our schools with teachers and banning books and all the rest. So listen, I'm a Catholic. I want to have these conversations. Where I fall, I'm a pro-choice Democrat. I always reference back to me being a father of a 17-year-old senior who don't know what life has in store for her yet, but God forbid she ever finds herself in a position where she might need to terminate a pregnancy, then I want her to have that option, and I want it to be safe, and I want it to be transparent, secure, done in a hospital and not in a back alley or somewhere else. So I want them to have those rights. I want all my nieces to have those rights. Even in some of our polling even has indicated that there's some crossover disapproval among Hispanics as well. So again, I think in a lot of ways, this is Texas. We want our rights. We like our liberties. We'll fight to defend them here a little bit more than other states, it seems like. And from that aspect, it does seem like a reproductive freedom was taken from women. And again, this is a freedom that a woman in the next state over will have. This is going to be horrible for business, I think. Wanting to come to Texas, this could be horrible for people wanting to come to school in Texas. It's going to be horrible for military who are stationed in Texas that will no longer have these rights here in Texas.
One last question I want to ask you. We last year we had the district maps redrawn, and District 23 went from a district that Donald Trump carried by, I think, 1.7% in 2020 to a district that he won by about 7%. When I remember talking to you at that time when the redistricting process was happening, and you said, you weren't surprised by it, that you anticipated that it was going to be put a little bit more into the Republican, or a little bit redder than it had been before. Do you think that this fundamentally, and I'm looking at this year's election, but also going forward for this district, do you think that this fundamentally changes District 23 and maybe is pushing it from being what was almost a 50-50 swing district to something different?
No, I do believe that Texas 23 and under the current lines is still in play. I think it's still in play because, again, Texas 23 is a district that doesn't have strong party infrastructure. Maybe in San Antonio, maybe in El Paso, maybe in some of the counties there. But when you don't have strong parties that are constantly advocating, then a candidate that goes out there and makes the effort has an opportunity to win this. So I think that if candidates come in and they work Texas 23, like we've been working with the Boots on the Ground tour, you establish the relationships, you prove to people that you're not a boogeyman, you're actually there to have an honest conversation with them, and you want to be a partner in developing their community and their counties. I think it has a chance. It's not that far out of reach at all. I mean, if you look at the Beto numbers from 2018 in this new district, he would have lost by less than a point. So I think that, it becomes, you have to excite the people of Texas 23. You have to get out there. You're not going to Zoom it in. They're not going to join an online thing. I mean, you have to go out there and meet them who you are. And that's what we've been doing for over a year. So, I think, again, you're right. I knew Republicans weren't going to do me any favors during redistricting. But I would say even, the small favor that they did do Gonzales has been squandered in a lot of ways, by the addition of Frank Lopez, by what happened in Uvalde and his kind of failure to rise to the occasion, and by just the district being so big. It is hard to establish name recognition out here unless you go out and you meet the people. Signs aren't even going to do it either. Of course, there's, he's plastering the district with signs at this point, but it has to be about relationships out here in Texas 23 and West Texas.
Well, John Lira, thank you so much for being part of the podcast, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Absolutely. Thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you, man.